Hello and welcome to Season 4, Episode 17 of Fabrically Speaking Live. I'm your host, Claire Rowley, inventor of the Creative Feet line of sewing machine products. And today I'm going to be discussing and showing not only patchwork applique, but other appliques to help maybe relieve some confusion that some of you may have as to all the different terminologies of the different types of applique out there. Are any of you confused about the terms that are used for applique? For instance, raw edge applique versus blanket stitch applique versus needle turn applique and patchwork applique. If you are, raise your hand in the comments so I can know. Today I'm going to be showing the Applique products that we offer at creativefeet.com, and for good reason, because they make it so that you can turn fabric really easy. Hello Judy, hello Wendy, hello Mom from Hood River, Oregon. And my eyesight is a little bit challenged today. What's up with that? Hello Valine from Pennsylvania, and welcome back Allison, so also known as Sewing with Trifocals. Are you guys hearing me okay, or am I too low? I think I may just have the volume down on this phone. I think I figured out how to actually be able to follow the chat in both Facebook and in YouTube. I can't see the chat working from Restream. Come on, send that. It says, hooray, you're in the chat, and then it's not working. I'm gonna have to give up on that, I guess. Oh well, I have two ways to watch. We don't need to worry about it. How about just let me get to my video that I have going on right now. Okay, there we go. So I can now see the chat on Facebook on one phone and in YouTube on the other. Feel free to ask questions as we move along during the show. It is a little low there. Seems like my sound setting has been taken down a little. Some of this stuff is like hard for me to do from where I'm sitting. It doesn't look like I lowered it, so I'm going to just project a little bit more. Okay. So needle turn applique has been given that name because of the, it seems like this mouse is working. There it is. Let's see. Oh, you're all there. There you are. It's my problem, not the setup's problem. Okay. Whenever you do applique, you need supplies because fabric is a stretchy medium. It has a weave and it can stretch in all directions. So we need to tame the fabric so that we can make it do things that it wouldn't allow you to do without stabilizing, for instance. So one of the products that we have for stabilizing traditional raw edge applique and also blanket stitch applique is our Fuse and Fuse stabilizer, which is what's holding these fabrics down. And I'm likely to play around and show you some different applique techniques in addition to the needle turn, which you can also use for doing your own hexie or octagon, because you can use the octahoops for a pattern. This is a hexie quilt kind of technique, or another term for this is what? What is this called, you guys? It's called English paper piecing? No. English foundation. English foundation paper piecing is what I believe it is. No? I don't know. So basically you take different shapes and you fold the fabric under and then you sew them together. And people take years to create quilts out of these hexes and then hand sew them together. You can use the same technique I'm going to show you now for also sewing together your pieces, whether it be an applique or also for a hexie quilt. Have any of you ever done this before? And sat there on the couch and hand sewed those pieces together? I'm impressed if you have. Now, the act of folding or curling your fabric under over a stabilizer can be very time consuming and also make your fingers sore or cramp up your hands from this repetitive motion that you would have to do. So my friend Rosa from Applique created these tools to mimic or replace the need for your hands doing this motion. Instead, you'll be moving in a much more relaxed method. One of the things you want when working with the Applique tools is a notepad, because and a damp washcloth would be great, which I don't have today. And the reason we're going to use a pad is you're going to put glue on your fabric and then roll it over to the stabilizer. Now sometimes people use glue and they use too much and it gets blobby. And also you can use glues that dry too fast. The Applique glue is designed to not dry fast. So some people get frustrated by that because they want a fast process and don't realize or are so good at it now that they don't need the extra time that the Applique glue provides for you. Hello, Pamela. Hello, Amy. I had a nice talk with Carlene today, those of you who've been wondering about her. And Judy Chadwick, hello. I think I'm going to just focus. So we're going to go tight on the top. And I'm going to grab some stabilizer from Applique. This is the one we use for traditional applique, the Fuse and Fuse. And you can, I don't know if you can see that the fabric edges are actually raw. So this would be raw edge applique. And with raw edge applique, generally you use a satin stitch with a zigzag stitch on your sewing machine. And I will be showing you that with the Satinedge Foot as we move along here. Trying to find the stabilizer. I have it. There it is. So the first thing I need to do is trace, and I'm only going to show you a little bit. I'm not going to do an entire project today. We have the pattern, and this pattern will be in the VIP group. Should you want to do a mini Dresden plate applique, one of the products that makes applique easier is the CutterPillar light tablet. And what you see on my table is the Ultra. It's a really large one. Their product is so good, they sell out really fast, and we currently only have the basic available. So I'm going to show you the basic. And the basic is, I think it's 11 by 17, if I remember correctly. And it is very thin profile. You can see it's not that heavy because I'm able to spin it around. If I can find the plug part. Where is it? There we go. So if you've been on the fence about getting one of these and thinking you want to get one, I would order right away because they said they're almost sold out of the basic as well. And they're sold out of the premium and the ultra. So because of their situation and selling out so fast and conditions with China, which is where they've been manufacturing these. They brought in a financial backer to help them be able to no longer be out of stock. And they just sent me a letter yesterday saying that they anticipate by December that they will no longer be back ordering on their products all the time. So yay for that. But if you're waiting or you're wanting one now, I would not wait and get the basic right away, because I've ordered as many as I've been allowed, and I'm having them send them directly to us because they just sell out too fast. And part of it's my fault because I'm always bragging about the product. I love it. So why do I like it so much? I'm going to take this pattern and place it beneath a pad that they are also sold out of right now, the edge to edge mat, and put that beneath this mat that doesn't have any lines on it. You can see it's clear, which makes it real easy for me to see the actual image below the top pad. And just need to find my cord, which is right here. This also uses a traditional cell phone, not the C, but the one before the C. So should you ever misplace your cord, you can use your cell phone cord for that. But if you go to the Ultra, it's a different type of plug. Now this light tablet lets you light 3 different levels so that you can see the actual work or pattern through it, allowing you to place your fabric over the top. And on this pattern, there's actually 2 lines, one that's smaller than the other. I didn't iron because I had a malfunction before we started. You can use the iron erase pens for this. And I had a pen, where is it? Oh, here it is. Not a chance what, Amy? So I'm going to draw the size that I want my fabric to be, which I'm going to go a little bit wider than this design. This is one way you can handle it. When you want to do a needle turn project, you need to have the fabric piece be larger and then cut out another piece of the stabilizer. And now I'm remembering what Rosa said. She said square cuts actually fold over the round piece easier for her. But she does pieces this big. She turns under a fabric and ends up with a piece only 1/4 inch wide. She is the master, or the queen of applique. So now I'm going to draw using the stabilizer. And if you were doing a design and say you have a little girl, maybe the Sunbonnet Sue, and the hat has to face a certain way, and you're forced to sew on the bumpy side of the stabilizer, I'm going to see how this works. This actually works on both. However, this irons away. And we're going to be ironing this to something else, so sometimes you don't want your item to iron away. These are special pencils that will write on the bumpy side of any of your embroidery stabilizers as well. So if I were doing the letter A and I didn't trace this the correct way because I couldn't get my pen to draw on the bumpy side of the stabilizer or whatever writing utensil I'm using, then I would have a really hard time reversing it. And if that doesn't make any sense to you, well, it's simply because I'm not explaining it well enough. I don't want to ruin this box. So I'm just going to show you the tool I have here. And I'm hoping, is this a good view for you? Oh, I know I can't tell. I haven't moved my image over. This and that. Now I can see what I'm doing, like you guys see it. Sorry, I had to sneeze. So these tools have a fork on one side of one of the tools, and then on the other is this kind of blunted in point. And then on the other tool, it's like a little spatula. I don't know if you can see the angle of that. That allows you to position your hand and spread the fabric out. And this replaces the need for your fingers. Instead, you use that, and you're able to put your elbows down on your table, which you know how much I recommend you always work with your elbows down to prevent stress on your hands. She also has scissors with 3 holes and, of course, a double pack of the glue that we're going to use. The scissors options are like this, and we are currently out of the large size. We're waiting on them to tell us that the large size is in. However, for applique, I tend to use the medium size and use this for larger cuts of fabric, and it allows you to position your hand like this, pinky on this little wing, and then 2 fingers go through there, and your index finger sits here and your thumb there. And what that does is it makes it so you're barely using any muscles to hold the scissor, as well as it distributes the muscles across your entire hand instead of focusing on one little area that you would normally do if you were holding your scissors like that. Usually you can feel that burn in your hand. Have you ever had the scissor burn, you guys? So I'm going to use the medium size of the 3-hole scissors and cut my, I could have done that closer to the edge and saved stabilizer. We always want to save stabilizer. I'm trying to make it so you can see. So I'm holding this funny. And my elbows are down for the cutting process as well. Have any of you ever tried to sew a circle before and have the edges be folded under and couldn't figure out how to do it? Or have you used freezer paper only to get really frustrated with how stiff the paper is and having to try to get the paper out of the stitching afterward? There's other methods. There's like the starching process as well, where you wet your fabric and starch the edges to get it to hold under. I like that for really big pieces, but when I'm doing a smaller applique project, I like to use the stabilizer. I have more control. You use newspaper. Just remember, paper, sewing through paper dulls your needle. So here we go. And a dull needle can damage fabric. Where's my pen? Where'd I draw it? There it is. Yeah, I didn't do a very precise design here, but I wonder what the heck happened to my settings on my microphone. There we go. So to show you my position, it's elbows down, shoulders relaxed again, trying to use as least amount of muscle in your hands as possible. As you're cutting, sometimes you can drop the fabric, and these scissors keep hold of the fabric so you won't be going, oh no, and then accidentally cutting in because it dropped out of the mouth of the scissors. What do you guys call it when you have your scissors opened? Kind of like a mouth. What do you call that opening? also am going to play around with not using invisible thread, but instead using Invasifil thread. Invasifil is a thread that's 100 weight, and it comes in colors, and I happen to have the colors for the two fabric options that I've chosen for today. So now you can see that the applique piece is actually a little bit smaller, about a 1/4 inch all the way around smaller. And it has a shiny side, and this shiny side is an ironing or a fusible, but it is not a permanent fuse. Now this means you can actually remove the stabilizer just as you would freezer paper, but it is a really nice stabilizer and gets softer the more the fabric is sat on and manipulated. So a lot of times people just leave it in. And your iron should be on cotton. And it's a pressing, not an iron. Well, the iron sounds loud when I bang it around. Now I'm going to cut around about and do snipping. And it's really up to you if you snip going straight. I like to come at it at an angle, especially when I have a stitch stitched all the way around. But whatever works for you. Another scissor option that we have are her little thread nips. And this is, I'm a little faster with these. Wow, that's the longest I've stayed silent on camera before, I think. It has a little bit of a screw on. No, I don't think it does, but maybe it does. But it definitely doesn't dry out. I haven't opened this probably in 7 months, and it's still wet. I need my book. Where are you, book? And the purpose of the book is to keep your surface clean. Now what Rosa does is she has one side where she glues and the other side she uses the tools. And instead of putting the glue on the actual stabilizer, you smear it and have it come out from the actual fabric instead. And this is when she would go, "What are you doing using your fingers?" That's a good way to get your fingers dirty and ultimately get your fabric dirty. So she actually shows how it'll hold it really well for you as you put the glue out like this. And then if you want to spin it, you can put one of the toes down. I glued too much. I glued it to the paper. There we go. And you can see how it can spin around for you. Do any of you already have these and have already used the Applique tools? I don't know what's not. I haven't looked in so long. I forgot what I said that made you say that, Amy. Hello, Lynn. Welcome. I also recommend that you bring the glue back under or in whenever you close it, instead of just leaving it up. Then you take and you move it over to the clean paper. And now you can bring the teeth or the little toes up and scoop up your fabric. One of the reasons I really like her glue is that it doesn't dry quick. My hands when they were younger were more agile than they are now. I tend to need a little bit more time, especially when I'm holding on to something. I also love using these for turning fabrics right side out and pushing a point on something that's a corner. But you got to be careful because one of them is really sharp and the other one is blunted. The point with the spatula end is a super tight point, which makes this a really nice stylus as well for those of you who do piecing. So it's a multifunctional tool. Two toes down holds it steady. Lift a toe, it lets you spin it. Elbows down, shoulders relax, hands are more relaxed because we're not having to do that to try to form the fabric over. Then you can go around and really make sure that you don't have any points because we don't want a pointed end. And that's where you bring in the little pointy end. And it allows you, because the glue is still a little bit wet, allows you to really form your shape for a perfect circle. The next step is going to be positioning this on some fabric. And I was going to show you a petal as well, but I feel like it would be more fun to show you more than one process today. There we go. Looks pretty good, but we can flip it over to see if we like what we've got. Sometimes it's easier to see it when you don't have the fabric ruffles facing up. So I can see I have a little point right there. I'm not real happy with that. And it's still a little bit pliable. It's almost like modeling clay at this point. Next step is to position this on the fabric that you're going to applique it onto. And to clean your tools with some damp water, I would recommend, and then when I do use this for a larger project, I have a damp washcloth and I wipe off the tools so that they're clean when I go to use them next time. If you neglect to do that, don't worry, you can just rinse it underneath the water faucet. It's a water soluble glue, so it's not permanent. When we do applique using a satin stitch, we need this fabric here supported so that it doesn't get distorted, get puckered. But when we do needle turn applique, I find that I don't need to stabilize the main body of fabric. You can see that I have a stabilizer adhered to the back side of the fabric for a traditional applique, and the shiny side is facing the iron when you iron. This is our Hold Light stabilizer. At creativefeet.com, under products, you'll find stabilizers and batting, and the Hold Light is what you're seeing here. What it does is it locks the fibers and prevents them from stretching as you sew, so that you can go around curves without causing puckers on your main body of fabric. So over here, I'm going to do this one with no backing and stitch around it so that you can see. I guess I didn't get that. Thought I had. Here we go. You can speed up the drying process by giving it a little heat as well. You can see that that is not fused to the fabric. So how do we get this now attached to the fabric? Any guesses? This is one project where the Creative Feet products and the Applique products come together for a perfect combination to make it so that you can not stress by having things shift on you, and without adding another fusible. This is a water-soluble stabilizer in a bottle. So I can also just put one little drop in the center of all my applique pieces, which is what I do when I do traditional applique, because this has a fusible side. I'll just put a dot, a dot, a dot, and then lay my pieces down. It holds it in place, and then I iron, and they don't shift when you iron. But for the needle turn process, I'm going to put some dots on the fabric. Especially if you're going to cut the back fabric away and pull out the stabilizer, which is a trick to making it look like you sewed a shape into a hole of the same shape. Then you just let that dry, or once again, you can put some heat on that and dry it quicker. Liquid Baste is the best. I agree. You can also shoot steam through this. Oops, I hit the water instead. Oh, I have no steam set. How are you guys doing? Are you guys ready for the weekend to come? You know what? I'm gonna turn you off because I don't need you anymore. So that is now held in place, and I'm ready to stitch around it. If you're a hand sewer and you prefer to do your hand applique or this type of applique and have 0 stitches showing, then she also has these incredibly fine hand applique hand needles that you'll find at creativefeet.com under the supplies link. And I was going to show you them. But they're just a hand sewing needle, just really, really fine. And why do you want a really fine tip? Because what we want to do is catch just ever so little bit of the applique fabric and then stitch on the fabric below. I'm going to do a similar behavior using the sewing machine and use the 7010 needle. And I can, because I'm also going down to a really fine thread. I could and normally do use invisible thread, which is what you see on my table right here, and why you don't see any stitching on the edge of this, which was in fact also done using the same method that I'm showing you now. Now the neat thing about this technique and if you do something really large like this, I could go around and cut the back fabric now 1/4 of an inch in from the stitching and pull out the stabilizer, and then it'll just look like a 1/4 inch seam allowance was used to sew that on. And that is a very common process done for needle turn, because normally people would use freezer paper, and you never want to leave the freezer paper inside, because then you would have a crunchy project and it would take a very long time for the freezer paper to disintegrate within the quilt. So see how you can't see the stitching on that? The invisible thread is see-through. This is Invasifil, not invisible. And I don't know why they called it that, but it's been confusing people for years. This is so fine that I feel I might get a result similar to using invisible thread on this. Because can you see the thread on that circle? It's really hard to see it. It's on there. Maybe I got too much light. Okay, so I am also, it doesn't really matter what bobbin thread you use for this. I'm fine with leaving a deco bobbin in there. To save time, I'm going to use a yellow decobob. Oop, I'm going to have to wind one soon. If you don't, if you're not familiar with the decobob bobbins, they come as a master set like this, which this is probably going to be the first bobbin that I'll use up completely. Try to put them back in the same container so you know it's decobob thread. But I could also wind a bobbin of the Invasifil thread. One full bobbin of Invasifil is the equivalent of winding 48 bobbins of cotton quilting thread. So if you do a lot of free motion quilting, this is absolutely a must for putting in your bobbin, and or you can use the deco bobs, which isn't as thin but still replaces the need to wind bobbins as often. I'm unplugging my CutterPillar tablet so I don't waste the light. The 80 weight bobbin thread has worked really well with 100 weight thread and all the way up to the jean stitch thread, which is very thick thread. I could play around with that a little bit today. What do you think? Do you want me to do a little bit with the jean stitch thread on this part before the show is over? If you do, say jeans or yes or whatever you choose in the chat. Now on our site, you're going to see that we carry the class 15 bobbins. You won't find the bobbins for other sizes, but we can special order them for you. There's just not as many people out there using the others. You had trouble with the denim thread on your Bernina. We'll discuss that. Good. I know I have a few spools ready. This is the 40 weight Polyfast, which would show up and is generally the type of thread you'd use for satin stitch applique, so that if you want your stitches to really show up. So the Polyfast is 40 weight and a beautiful sheen to this thread. In this case, we don't want our stitches to show. We want to look like we hand sewed it, and this thread doesn't have as much shine as the other thread. Even though it's shiny right here, it's nothing compared to the sheen of the Polyfast. So I'm placing this on one of the vertical posts on my thread dispenser, which is a thread stand that I dreamt the design in a dream and then drew a picture of it, and it stops the skipping, looping, thread breaking. It also is a nice, convenient way to store your thread while you're working on a project. I went to a show, one of the last shows I did actually, in Phoenix, right before I got COVID for the first time, and stopped doing shows. But I stopped doing shows for other reasons. I just got tired of traveling all the time. So I am going to use the, I just realized I'm saying the word sew a lot. It's like, why am I doing that? I don't want to just put this down. I know this is an 80-12 super non-stick, so I want to put it back in because I barely used it. Yay! It's good to be organized. The jean stitch, when you use that, what kind of needle did you use, Lynn? What size? The pearls and piping foot was a dream as well. I worked all night on that. So I developed several techniques in my sleep as well. Dreams are very important for me. I got a new song in my head apparently, and this light is not usually this bright. I'm going to turn it down. Oh, that's better. It's as if someone came in here and messed with my stuff. So now I'm using the needle threader, and I warn you, 10 needle, the eye may be too small for your needle threader to go through, and especially with thread. So I'm actually not even going to take a chance. I'm going to use one of these absolutely wonderful little hand needle threaders that I have. And we have them in stock. We sell out of these like crazy. People like to buy them. They buy them like 10 at a time. So it was we had 250 in stock in 2 days. They were gone. So if you're like that, they're a great gift too for anyone that hand sews or sews with a sewing machine or a serger. Close tight. Here we go. It has this tiny, tiny little, it's smaller than your machine's wire that goes through the needle. Super, super tiny hook on there. But it's great for feeding yarn through your needle as well. And I'm like, where did I put my glasses? I know I had them. I need to make a button that I push and my glasses are called to me. Well, let's see if I can do this without eyesight. Now, if you can't see the eye of the needle, you can put a white or a bright color fabric behind the eye and it opens it up for you. I have an issue with my thumb. That it's making it not work as well as it normally does. It was so cool in here. Now it's hot again. There we go. Another nice thing about this, it has a hole for putting the needle in the machine. So if your dexterity is in there, or if you don't have full range of motion with your fingers, you can actually use that to hold your needle while screwing it in as well. So a multi-function tool that fits really nice right up here on my sewing machine. And I have two. So I thought I lost mine. Do any of you see my glasses on my table anywhere? I know I had them. Oh well. This is good for you guys to see because sometimes, and a lot of my customers do not have good eyesight or full eyesight. And the person that I designed the foot for that I'm about to show you was born blind and deaf. Now when I designed the foot for her, it was not adjustable. It was a locked in one position presser foot because she never saw anything in her entire life. The most inspiring person in my life, and her name was Mary. She's long since joined the Angels because I was only 19 when I was teaching her machine use instruction on her sewing machine that I modified for her. And pulling out my ankle for my sewing machine, as a lot of us call it, the ankle. Oh, I found my screwdriver thingy. Do not put open safety pins inside of something like that. I just poked myself. This is one of the quiltlets or handles that I use, or bracelets that I use when I have something that's large and I want to control it, and I roll it up and safety pin, wrap it around and safety pin again, and then you can actually carry it or hold it. So if any of you do hand quilting sitting at your couch and you want to hand sew and you have to keep lifting the weight of the quilt around, or whatever project you're doing, you actually can wear it around your wrists with these. It's really high tech. Did I put it somewhere else? Maybe I put it here. I didn't put it there, and that's usually where I put it. I have too many containers now. I got something with this little black box, and I was like, this is perfect for the sewing machine area. And it had two sides, and now I have too many cubbies. Okay. All right, I found the ankle, so all's good. And why is it off the machine in the first place? Because I used the Octi hoops last week and showed how to do free motion quilting using the Octi hoops. So if you're interested in learning about free motion quilting and want to see how I did this, little stitching without a foot, be sure to check out last week's Fabrically Speaking Live. And if you like this design, I did this last fall, and it's a series of Fabrically Speaking Live episodes showing you different ways of doing piecing. And over here there were several different methods of piecing, because you don't have to just do one method. And then I showed couching with trim and painting or inking your fabric, and it's one of my favorite things I've ever done. I'm going to come up with something else for this fall. Would you like pumpkins? I was thinking about maybe doing one that's just fall and having maybe fall leaves, or maybe an asp or cypress trees, or I don't know. Your ideas in the comments. Please help me come up with ideas. There's 365 days in a year, right? Gosh, I hope I'm right. 52 weeks in a year. That's 52 ideas I have to come up with a year. I could use your help. Can you help me? Can you give me ideas? All right, here we go. So I'm going to explain the Satinedge Foot. The Satinedge Foot has this little white guide and a pin that sticks out of the guide itself. This is actually a piano wire, so you can't break it with your sewing machine needle. And you see how it goes through the zigzag opening and passes it? And what that guarantees is that you have an assistant, a guider, a helper to make sure that your fabric stays positioned underneath the needle so you don't have to. It attaches to most sewing machines by just snapping it on. If you do not have a snap-on foot with a, oh, this is one I decorated. Because of course, can't have all your creative feet plain and ordinary. Okay, so standard snap-on feet are 7 millimeter wide. The Singer sewing machine has some of their sewing machines that only have an 1/8 of an inch bar, and then there's the Pfaff and the Janome, and those machines have a 9 millimeter wide bar. So for those of you who have the 9 millimeter wide bar, you'll use our B adapter, as each of the feet come with adapters. This is the Singer adapter. Adapter. This is the little adapter, also known as the low shank adapter. So if you know your machine has a low shank, there you go. And if you have a Bernina sewing machine, the Bernina sewing machine is a low shank. You can use one of these adapters that are available at creativefeet.com or from your Bernina dealer as well. And then attach it to our sewing machine foot. And then slide it up underneath your machine's lever and pull it down, and you have it for the Bernina. If you have a Pfaff sewing machine, you're going to also use the shortest of our adapters and put it up underneath the screw after removing your machine's ankle. Then tighten that down with a screwdriver, and then you just push down on the white part and it snaps right onto the foot, and now you have our foot on your machine. Now that may seem like a pain in the sewing machine, but This foot does top stitching, edge stitching, pin tucking, invisible applique, applique stitching in a ditch, charted needle design without the use of knitting needles, cut work without the use of a hoop, wire edges, fishing line edges, lattice edging, trapunto applique, blanket stitch applique, edge joining, t-shirt hemming, 1/8 inch, 1/4 inch, scant 1/4 inch seam allowances, and it does the hand sewing for you, and that is what we're doing now. So I'm going to position the foot in this manner, bringing the sewing machine needle, first selecting the machine instructions that are included no matter how you got the Satinedge Foot. It's the invisible applique technique. And the invisible applique technique is a zigzag stitch that's 1 millimeter wide. 1 millimeter wide is so close, it's almost like you're barely keeping your fingers apart. Tiny, tiny little zigzag swing left and right. If you want, you can go as low as or as narrow as a 1/2 millimeter movement left to right. And I found out it really doesn't matter. One seems to work, but if you really, really want to make sure you can't see the stitch at all, a 1/2 millimeter is also more than possible. It works really good. Now what's going to happen is the sewing machine needle is going to swing off the edge of the fabric in one swing and on the edge in the other, which is what you do by hand. You would go off the edge, on the fabric, off the fabric, on the fabric, off the fabric, on the fabric. And that takes a lot longer by hand than it does by machine. You like leaves? Oh, pumpkins and leaves. That's a good idea. And then should I paint the leaves? Should we ink the leaves and then I don't know. I'm on the fence. There's so many things we can do. Choosing my zigzag stitch, 1 millimeter wide. That's the sound you're hearing. Left swing. I don't know where to put the foot down. I'm going to draw this for you because it helps everybody understand better. You can see what's in my cubby. We really do only have 3 creative feet, but I have several versions of them in here. So this is the design of the Satinedge Foot, kind of, sort of. And the guide wire goes through the opening, and this is the snap-on bar. And so this is the fabric over here. And the sewing machine needle is going to come down on the, so this is the fabric. This is the guide wire, or guide pin. And we're going to have the sewing machine needle go right next to the guide pin and the between the fabric's edge and the pin on the foot. But you choose the width of your stitch first and get that teeny tiny little zigzag stitch. After you set that 1.0 millimeter wide swing, you bring the sewing machine needle down and check which position it's in, and when it is in the right swing of the zigzag stitch, we then turn the nut on the foot, which moves the guide assembly over, and bring that guide wire over to the needle with the needle lowered. When your needle is up, it's wider up here. It's got a bigger width than when the needle is down. When the needle is down, I'm trying to say this, I'm saying this wrong. So the point of the needle is what can hit the guide on the foot. This is the wide part of the foot. So when the needle is down and below the fabric, you're not at risk of the needle hitting the guide pin. So that's what I'm doing, and there's instructions with much better illustrations than my little sketches. This is better to do with your glasses on. Your stitch length does not have to be as close because it's not a satin stitch, it's just a hand stitch. So however close you would do your hand stitches all the way around is how long your stitch length can be. Once you know you're not bending the sewing machine needle with the guide, so I've lowered the needle and brought the needle down. I cannot believe that I can't find my glasses. They were on the machine when I arrived today. Once you know that you're set up correctly, then you want to watch the white part of the guide and just keep bringing the fabric back to the guide. And remember, this is not invisible thread that I'm using. I'm using Invasifil. This is like a lemon yellow color thread, which you can see when it's on the blue, but you can't see it when it's on the yellow as much. If you start to lose your edge, you can just lower the needle and lift the foot and spin it around. You won't lose your position with the fabric because you're not you're not having to check needle position. Normally you would lower the needle, lift the foot, spin the foot around, and have to make sure you know where your needle's going to swing, but you know that the guide is in line with the fabric. Once you get the hang of not looking at the sewing machine needle, instead trusting the foot, you'll do better. On curves or circles, I do lower my needle about every 1/4 inch of sewing, but I don't have to I don't have to check to make sure I'm in position after that. So one more time, we bring our needle down in the outside swing, raise the foot and move it over, and then lower it again and continue sewing. And I'm going to show you my positioning so that you see that I am not, in fact can't because I have stuff in front of me. I'm not sitting like this, which is the position that most appliqueurs sit in. That your nose right up in that needle and watching that needle swing. You cannot focus on a needle swinging left and right. Even just my finger moving very slowly left to right. You can't actually grab it with your eyes and keep your eyes on it. Maybe a cat can do that, but we're not that good at that. So it ends up being a blur, and you think you're seeing, but you're really just not focusing and letting your eyes go out of focus, which is really not good for you. It causes some eye strain. So rather than watching something that's moving, we're watching the guide, which is not moving. We can focus on the fabric and the guide, and it's just a continual bringing the fabric back to the guide. So much easier. Have any of you done the invisible applique and can actually say that what I'm saying is accurate for those that are new and watching? And welcome if you are new to my channel. I'm now going to get this out of my way so I can see the guide on the foot. Elbows are down, and I'm not holding on to the fabric like this. I'm cradling or supporting the fabric, giving it a little bit more of an ease of going around the surface of the sewing machine instead of controlling or trying to battle with the fabric's movement. And I think this is partly why you don't really need to have stabilizer on the back fabric, because it's such a long stitch length and such a narrow stitch width that it doesn't burden or create a lot of strain on the fabric itself. Once again, you swing your needle and bring it down in the outside swing. A lot of people are like, why don't you lower your needle? Why don't you have it set to always go down? Because sometimes it goes to the left and sometimes it goes to the right. I want to have control over it always going on the outside swing. If you can remember it's the outside swing, you'll have much better time, much easier time. These are the kind of things you want to say out loud to yourself. The needle is always in the outside swing when you lower it. Simple. Much easier than trying to remember left versus right versus which way you're turning. And now I'm back to the sewing part. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to ask. Ooh, I'm hot. I think I'm going to lose the jacket. I was going to leave that tail there so I could see where I started and stopped, because I can't see worth a darn. having misplaced my glasses. So left swing is on, right swing is off, but I'm focused here, not there. Especially on a super non-stick needle because they are dark in color and harder to see. Lower the needle again. There's so many things I could do. But I have the desire to make a desk cover for my sound booth. And you can always, my friend has a round table. And it's where she sits. And she's physically challenged, so she's got a square placemat on there right now. And sometimes she puts her cup down on the placemat, and because it's not level, the cup falls. So I'm thinking about making her a round placemat. Instead of a tablecloth that would drape over, I'm going to make a actual placemat that she can enjoy and use to protect the wood on her table that won't tip her cup over. So what could I do in that design? Because it would be round. Hello, Brenda. Better days, sewing in trifocals. There's all of you guys have these cute little names. It's like your code names. So notice that I'm not going fast as well. It isn't a race to get to the finish line. And you can take your needle thread and go through to the back side, or if your sewing machine has a knot stitch, you can tie a knot. And I have gone all the way around. As you can see on the back. So you can see the stitch going all the way around. See how it's a teeny tiny little zigzag? And now there's no special effects here. Just flip it over. And it's just because the stitch is so small. Now after this is manipulated, it gets soft, and that stitch will get tucked under. Since this isn't any particular project, I'm going to go ahead and show you how you can actually make this look like I sewed it in a hole by taking the fabric and cutting into it. But you want to make sure you don't cut through to the back side. So we're trying to just grab this back fabric, which has the fusible on it. This is a time for her tweezers. And I'm just kind of breaking the hold of the fusible. It's a little noisy. I think I'll move to the other area. So now the fusible is really no longer fused. It's just in between these layers. And I can take my seam ripper Aren't the tweezers awesome? I couldn't resist buying one for eyebrows and chin hairs. So you can see that my seam ripper is through, but it isn't through. Now I'm going to go to about 1/4 of an inch away from that stitching line and cut a little slit. Use her little scissors. Make sure that I don't go through the fabric. You can see how I'm cutting a hole. So as I mentioned before, if you're wanting one of the CutterPillar light tablets, hurry up and order because they're going to be sold out for some time. And we only have, any other size you'll be waiting for. But if you order now, you'll be one of the first ones waiting instead of waiting longer. And they can't give me a date yet on when we have the other ones in stock. So the green one, the one with the green border, is the one that we're getting some in, but only, I think I'm only going to get 4. I'm hoping I get 4. Still waiting on their response. So now I go in here and breaking the hold of the glue. And we can actually get the stabilizer completely out. But you can see it's time consuming, and if I just go like this a lot, this becomes softer and you can't really tell that there's a stabilizer in there. But it is no longer fused. Or am I thinking backwards? I am thinking backwards. It is fused right now to the yellow. Back to the tweezers. You forgot about me? That's why you're late? I'm not surprised any of you had trouble because we had so many problems in a row that I think some people were giving up on me. Not anymore. Everything is working good. So I can pull this out. And then you're just left with a 1/4 inch hole or a circle. And a great process for a quilt where you want it to be an absolute no additional anything in there. Do you want me to play around with the other applique now? Know that you can also do this on a garment, and it's really, really pretty. Maybe I'll do that. Get a jacket and do an applique on a garment. Would you like that? Because I tend to just do a lot of little projects here. There was a time there when a designer was out and she was doing a lot of appliques, and she was my student and was taking private instruction from me at my store, and then she released a whole line of garments with appliques mixed with leather and lace on top of t-shirt and sweatshirt material and rhinestones and sequins and all of that. And I don't know, is that coming back in style? You tell me. Is that back in style? Is anything go right now? Maybe something for the holidays, a fancy jacket idea. I'm going to pull out the denim thread or the jean stitch thread. I can also play around with the glow-in-the-dark thread too. Halloween is on the way. Where's all my jean stitch? Oh, here's a green one. We'll just use that. That's not very pretty, especially if I'm going to be putting it on the pink. We moved, and I still am trying to find all the stuff that moved with us. I'm just going to use a little bit of that, not going to worry. And this is the glow-in-the-dark thread, which if you look at our website, you can see the different colors that it comes in. And during the day they look like this, but at night they glow, and they each have a similar look. They don't glow the color that you see. They haven't gotten that good with the science yet. I'm still looking for another denim up here. Trying not to open a brand new one. I don't like the green, but you know what? It'll show up. I know I shouldn't care that much, but I do. You guys care. I know, because you're always telling me what color to use. So we have two colors to choose from in the green options that I have here on my table. And I'd rather not run out of a color, because the company that makes this thread sold. Got a lot of instability in the industry right now. The Karen K. Buckley scissors, can't get some of them right now. And the jean stitch thread looks like it's going to be good to go. They're going to keep producing it in all the colors. But the really pretty ribbon stuff that the quilt highlights, they're not going to keep making it. So I wouldn't wait on that either. If you want to get some of that for your holiday sewing, we have some in stock, but we will not be able to get that back in stock. I'm going to have to investigate and research other options in the industry and hopefully come up with something as lovely or close to as lovely as what they were offering us. I know that Wonderfil's been trying to get me to try some of this kind of stuff. So I've never tried this in the needle. Should we do that today? I say, let's try that today. And I'm going to take out this really fine needle because I'll destroy it with a thick thread. This is what was a 7010 super universal needle. Glow in the dark with a skull. I did the glow in the dark with the kitty. Do you guys remember that? It's a fur. I did a fur applique with black fur. It was a cat witch, and did spider webs with the glow in the dark thread. We'll see. A skull? Maybe, huh? I'll attract some younger sewers with that. My hand really hurts. I fell. I fell twice, because once wasn't enough. And when I fell the first time, I fell like that, and it's not been the same since. So I am a little bit challenged right now. Careful what you say. Just a few needles. Because this thread is so thick, I need to at least go with a 90-14, and I'm pretty sure 90-14 worked. Is that what you tried, Lynn? I haven't been able to keep up with the chat. So do you know what needle size you used, Lynn? Bernina sewing machines. Which Bernina do you have? Is it a newer one or an older one? A top stitch needle is a better option for this thread. Can't remember if that's what I did. I think that's what I did. It's been a while since I appliqued with the denim thread. Can you see how I struggle? So now you know it does matter what needle you have. You do need needles. A lot of people think that it's not true and we're just trying to sell you more needles, but it's really about making your life easier and not destroying your fabric. So a top stitch needle is best for this thread in a 90-14, and that has to do with the width of the groove going down the face of the needle. Sorry, the noise it's making. I wasn't planning on doing this, or I would have the top stitch needle out. I will give up in a minute if I, oh, there we go. There's my top stitch, but that one's an 80-12. Too small. What happens if you use too small of a needle with your thread? How do you know that you've done that, maybe? what is the biggest or most common problem that you have if you use too small of a needle with your thread size? Did you know that matters? Come on, answer me. Hey, I found one. I found what I needed. All right, I feel better. So a 9014 top stitch needle, and I'll explain the differences between these and why am I not using this super universal, because I love it so much. It has to do with the diameter of the thread. This is a sizable thread. This is the 100 weight that I was just sewing with. Compare those two. Can you even... Where's the Invasifil? You're there somewhere. Come on. There we go. So there's significant difference in the size of those threads. Down the front of a regular universal needle, and this is the most sold needle in the world, the universal 8012 is the most commonly used needle worldwide. It's also available in a top stitch also, and a top stitch needle has a different level, a different shape of how the thread drops from the little groove down into the eye of the needle. It has a longer distance and a more gradual drop, so that the thread itself doesn't start to drag on the fabric. If the thread drags on the fabric, then the thread will be pushed into the back of the needle, and the back of the needle, this little chunk where there is no metal, is the scarf of the needle, and that's where the sewing machine hook comes around and grabs the thread. If anything is causing your thread to touch the fabric instead of hiding in the anatomy of the needle, then your hook cuts the thread instead of grabbing it, and then you're a few stitches in, you'll start to get an accordion kind of scrunched up appearance above the eye of the needle. That is why it's so important that you use the right size needle and the right type. Did I grab this? No, I grabbed a regular universal. I know that I'll have shredding issues with that, so I'm not going to use it. It shreds your threads. You guys are good. You know, you've been hanging out with me long enough now. If in doubt, thread your needle without putting it on your machine and see if it goes into the groove. If it's groovy or not. Hi, Sherry. Okay. So, taking that little threader through there and pull it through. I'm almost nauseous because I'm can't see worth a darn. Got it through the eye. I keep thinking one of my lights is a magnifying glass. I'm just gonna buy a whole nother pack. Get a set of 7 more readers. I tried to use my other glasses that I bought, trifocals, and it's as if I borrowed somebody else's glasses. My eyesight improved. For driving, for distance, I can see really good now. Oh, come on, Claire. Ooh, see how it's just sizable. Got it through though. All right, so this is how you do it. This is what you want to look for when you're seeing if your thread is the needle size is correct. And you take it and go through some fabric. And you can look at the back side and see if that thread can hide in the groove. See, that's what happens in your machine that you guys don't see. And I know this will work, so I'm going to put this needle on the machine. What are you guys making for dinner? Last night I had shrimp and sausage and asparagus and mushrooms in miracle noodles. I made like a garlic, olive oil pasta. And I'm hungry and I need an idea. I'm starting to get bored. I hate to say bored, but I need some ideas. I need a fresh idea for a healthy meal. I don't eat pizza. I don't like it. Thankfully, I don't like it. But get any ideas? Once again, I'm taking the thread and putting it on my thread dispenser, and I do that because now it has no tension on the thread. And because this is thicker than average thread, it just using it increases the drag of the thread, which increases tension of the thread. So the normal thought process is, if your thread is going through the machine and it is thicker and it's slowing down, you want to release the thread tension to make it move easier through the tension discs. Another thing that you can do is skip the thread guide right above the eye of the needle. So don't put it through there, and it will then go directly to the eye and have less resistance there as well. Another thing to note is that because what am I hearing? Sounds like somebody's on the roof. I don't know if you guys can hear that. There may be someone on the roof. So the needle, when it comes down, every stitch that it makes, when you have a bigger thread, you need a bigger stitch because it'll have trouble bending a tight turn or a tight movement. And I'm not going to use my needle threader again because it was hard to get it through there, and I'm not going to break my needle threader or bend my needle threader no matter what. I'm using my fingernail to show the eye of the needle better to myself. Sounds delicious wet. Go pick up a Costco salad. No work. I'm taking the foot off, and I'm going to take a little piece of paper and put it behind the eye of the needle so that I can see the eye of the needle. And I feel like I'm just not doing you a good service by not going and getting my glasses. However, I have no idea where they are, so just got to get the thread caught on the little hook. And I pull it through gently as well because I don't want to break my hand needle threader either. As soon as I can, I dislodge that loop. This is two layers of this thread going through the eye, which is a drag. Now there's no tension because the presser foot is up, but there's tension. You can see the needle's deflecting as I pull the thread, which means I need to take this tension down considerably. And if the thread were up on the machine, well, then it'd be even tighter. It'd be really, really hard for the machine to pull a spool this thick over on a vertical post. So you may have a horizontal. And if you do, know that a heavier thread is more likely to fall off the spool in a more heavy manner and get caught on the bottom if the spool is sideways, which is why it's better to feed it straight up. Now, if you don't have one of my thread dispensers and you can't afford one right now, you can take and place the spool inside of a coffee cup, take a popsicle stick and glue a safety pin to the end of it with the end of the safety pin pointing out, and tape it to your machine with painter's tape so you're not damaging your machine, and have the coffee cup be out here, and make sure that you are past the hand wheel with that stick, any kind of stick that you have. So basically, you create your own little thread dispenser, and a coffee cup prevents the spool from falling over. Or at some point, you can pick up one of my thread dispensers, and it's a lot easier than with a tight space, especially. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and use a satin stitch or a zigzag stitch. Now, with a really thick thread like this, we don't have to use as short of a stitch length. You can also put more than one thread through the eye of this needle. You can probably put as many as 4 rows of 40 weight thread through the eye of one 9014 top stitch needle. And that will make it so your stitch length doesn't have to be as short, making it so that you can do longer stitch lengths, making it so that your applique projects get done quicker. If you're a manufacturer, it's a really good thing to know. And also you can make flags and not have to worry about tearing your flag fabric tearing in the wind because you're not using as short a stitch length. And I did have flag companies set up with the Satinedge Foot making flags and not having problems. I'm like, I don't know how long my battery is going to last on this phone. Okay, so back to the close up camera, and I'm switching. I'm going to do a zigzag stitch and then we'll try something else. The first thought is, I know the tension's too tight. So I'm going into my machine settings, which I would show you if I could, but I can't live. So figure out where your tension is normal if you have a computerized machine. A lot of times they say they automatically adjust tension, but they don't. They just give you your best guess for what you're doing. So the zigzag stitch, and because this thread is so big, I'm gonna take it to a 3. No, I'll do a 2.5. 2.5 wide width. So 2.5 millimeters side to side. And normally we would be all the way down to a 0.3 on the stitch length. So we're trying to cover the edge and we're trying to do a zigzag stitch. And really it's up to you how close your stitches are together. A satin stitch is a zigzag stitch that's really short. Oh, I'm not in the, sorry about that. So a satin stitch is a zigzag stitch that's close together. Getting your sewing machine to feed with a stitch length that short, which would be more like a 0.4 millimeter stitch length, with your hands on the fabric, makes you get pile-ups. The machine can't feed at all. It'll just pile up. Has that ever happened to you? Have you ever had a pile-up? Have you ever had a pile-up and didn't know you had a pile-up, and then you had to take the throat plate off and cut the thread away from, it was a big old mess. Just know it's happened to me as well. So with this thread, because this thread is about 20 times thicker than what I had on before, I'm probably going to go to a 1.0 millimeter and see what we get, see how close it is. So this is the other thing that we do on the Satinedge Foot. It's different than what we did before. The guide wire on the foot, which is inside the zigzag opening. How many times do you think I've drawn my Satinedge Foot? In 34 years. 34 years. A long time ago. In this case, we're still going to have the fabric be right along the edge of the guide wire, which is what you see here. This is the guide wire. But in this case, we're going to have the needle swing right of the guide and then come onto the fabric. It's going to go back and forth, and the foot is going to sit still, and the fabric is going to advance unless you make the stitch length too short. So we're starting out at a 1.0. This is why it's good to get my notebook, the Creative Feet Technical Guide and Workbook, and you can make notes. You can say this thread, and you make a little sample, and you take the sample and you put it in the book, and you point to it, and you go, these are the settings I used. And then when you go to do it again another day, you know what you did before. 3.5 5mm wide. Bring the needle down in the right swing of the zigzag stitch. Now I'm going to hit the guide pin if I continue, so that is what you're looking for. You want to make sure that the right swing of the zigzag stitch goes over the guide wire, not on it. Otherwise, the first experience you're going to have with my Satinedge Foot is a broken needle. Now this is a trick to tying a knot, is to bring your thread to the front and stitch over the thread for a little bit. And I'm doing that because tying a knot with a thread this thick is just not going to work. I forgot to change my thread tension. I'm going to go down on my foot pressure as well, how hard the presser foot bar pushes against the fabric. See how I can lift it up? If you can't lift it up, it's probably too tight, and then it'll cause distortion and make it hard for you as well. What did I do? I cut through the thread. Thread's stuck on something. Have you guys ever tied a knot that way? Just bring your thread forward and stitch over it. This is something you do with a serger as well. It's nice. Thread tension, where are you, thread tension? Which screen are you in? I don't do it very often. It's not on a screen, it's right in, I do it all the time. It's on the front screen. I'm taking it down a whole number from 4.0 tension to 3.0 tension, and we'll see what we get. The brain doesn't work as well when you're doing something you don't do all the time. I can hear the thread going through, and I want to make sure that I have it on too short of a stitch length. There was a 0.8, now I'm taking it to 1.0. I'm going to find my little scissors so I can cut that thread. Where are my little scissors? Once I go past that piece of thread that I'm stitching over, I need to go a little bit longer or shorter on the stitch length. I'm actually taking it to 1.4mm stitch length. Yeah, isn't that a time saver? Going from a 0.4 to a 1.4. So now that I've reached the end of that little piece of thread, I'm shortening it back down. I'm going to go down to 1.0. Because that piece of thread took up volume of space. And as before, I don't watch the sewing machine needle. I watch the front of the foot, making sure the fabric's always touching the white part of the guide. And I'm going to come all the way down to the point and stop with the needle raised in the up position. And then you lift the foot. And before just going, because of the thickness of this thread, I'm going to pull a little bit of slack on this and then pull off the guide wire. That releases it, and then you can spin around and lower the foot. But now we have this bit of thread. We have this slack. What do you do with the slack of thread, you guys? You come up here on your machine and pull it back, but do so with the presser foot lifted just a little bit so that you're opening the discs, you're opening those tension discs, and that pulls the slack back above the tension discs. And now you shouldn't have a problem even though you have slack, but I'm still going to pull it even down a little bit further so that it is closer to the spool of thread. And I'm actually going to turn my hand wheel for the first stitch just to see that it is advancing, because sometimes when we mess with the thread, we can cause the bobbin and needle thread to come too tight to each other, and then it hesitates. Another issue that you have when turning like this is the foot is going up and over the stitch that you already sewed. And this is true even without my foot. This is something that you are maybe not aware of when you're doing applique, and then you just go, why does it keep getting stuck? And then all of a sudden it just goes bzz, and you get this big space. Raise your hand if you've had the pile up and spreading and felt like this is not even worth doing. It is so frustrating. And know that I felt that way when I was 17 and learning how to do applique, and I hadn't invented this foot yet. It was embarrassing to show my projects that I did. In order to not get stuck, as the foot goes over the stitch that you already sewed, you need to increase the stitch length. So I'm at 1.0, and say it out loud. What are you at? 1.0, I'm going to take it to 1.4. And I'm going to sew slow because I don't want to I don't want to just zoom along and find out I wasn't right. Don't want to get the pile up. Don't want to get the, and I had a little blob of thread. It looked like a little blob of thread. So I'm going to really check my thread. I may have pulled it too tight. We'll see how it goes. I can't see with the darn. I'm going to turn the handle always toward you when you do. This is at a 1.4, and I'm going to do this just until I see it moves. Once it moves, then you can shorten it back down. Back to 1.0. So it's just to help it get over the mountain. Think of your thread that you've already stitched as a mountain that the foot must go over. Once again, watching the front of the foot, not the needle. And just keep bringing the thread back to the spool. Something sounded weird, but I don't know what they're doing on the roof. I don't know if you can hear them on the roof, but they're making sounds, and I got a headphone in my ear. And I'm going to show you my body positioning is once again shoulders relaxed, elbow down. I have this padded surface. My little pillows are out of my reach, but I have my cushion right here, so that's okay. And I'm sitting cockeyed because I have this in front of me. You should be sitting parallel or in front of your needle. The needle should always be in line with your nose, centered with your body. Otherwise, you'll be tipping, and that causes your spine to be twisted and leaning and puts pressure on the nerves between your vertebrae. So make sure that you're resting and you're sitting straight. I'm not sitting proper because I'm making it so the camera can see what it is I'm doing. If I weren't sitting like this, I would be sitting like this with my elbows down. For me, it's better if I push my sewing machine further back, which is why I do not have my sewing machine in a cabinet. People ask me all the time, isn't it better if you just got a cabinet and you could drop your machine in? Some people think I have it up because the machine's painted and I want you to see the pretty painting on it. But I have it up because depending on what I'm doing, it's better for me to have the machine further away from me, sometimes closer, depending on what I'm doing. So I like being able to, and sometimes I even turn the machine a little bit. So that's why, in case you're wondering. This is what I usually do. I'm usually just one finger guiding, barely touching, and I'll do this for a little bit so that you can see that I'm able to do that. I use my fingernail and I go down. You could actually use a stylus. The Applique tool would be good. Take the Applique tool instead of your fingers and just rest your head and focus on just the front of the guide and ignore everything else. So now you see what I'm doing. I'm going to switch so you can see it up close. I'll move the machine a little bit. This is the 2-finger tool, and I can just put one toe down, and it's going to, at some point, the fabric starts to separate too much. Then you just lift the foot. Because the fabric is stuck to the foot, you don't have to lower the needle, but if you feel more comfortable doing so, by all means, make sure you always lower it in the outside swing, as I said before. I went a little bit too far. We'll see if I get away with it. You can also use this point if having two toes is too much to think about. Come down with the needle in the right swing. Lower the needle, lift the foot, spin it around, drop the foot. Needle in the outside swing. This is when having a button is nice instead of trying to do it by turning your hand wheel. Would you guys like me to show you a little blanket, see if we can use this for blanket stitch? And Lynn, I'm gonna see if you actually told me what needle size you used. Are you still there? Did you go back to sleep? There's just too many. Thank you for posting so much. I can't keep up, so I'm gonna come all the way around to finish this and do the next petal with a blanket stitch and see how the jean stitch thread performs. I think it's gonna be awesome. And so what are the settings? The settings for the jean stitch thread is 1 tension number less than normal. So whatever your machine is normal at is in your instruction manual. For my machine, my tension is normal at 4.0, and so I took it down to 3.0 using a thread stand instead of putting the thread spool on the machine. There's 0 resistance on the thread until it engages with the first thread guide on the machine, and I got a beautiful result. So now I'm going to hop over to the next petal, always grabbing the thread and pulling it down instead of pulling and having the needle possibly break, because this thread is so thick. So if you've been afraid to sew with thick threads, now it's time to try it out and see what you think. Blanket stitch is probably not a good idea, but I'm going to try it anyway, and I'll explain why here. A blanket stitch goes 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. That's a lot of stitches back and forth for a thread this thick. There's another stitch called the shell tuck stitch, which just is, let's see, let me find it on my machine. So the shell tuck stitch goes like this, except for instead of a space, it's right up on itself. And it's designed to hem lingerie, so you get a shell. The stitch sews a straight stitch across, and then it tacks it, and then a straight stitch and tacks it. So if you have thin materials or a fabric cut on the bias that's sheer, you can get a shell looking hemline using that stitch. And the stitch is pointing a different direction. So in order to use the shell tuck stitch for applique, I'm sorry, I had the stitch pointing this is the way it normally stitches. So in order to use it for applique, we need to flip the stitch using the mirror setting and get it to go that way. Or you just gotta use the other side of the guide. In other words, and the stitch needs to go this way, and it's pointing that way. So I can either, if your machine has the ability, you can flip that pattern over. If you can't, then you use the opposite side of the Satinedge Foot guide, and you don't have to flip your switch or your stitch. I'm getting tongue-tied. We're gonna be ending soon. So I'm gonna flip, I don't even know how to do it. Yeah, I'm flipping my stitch. So mirror is the term they use in the sewing machine. On mine I had a little button, and it just shows me a triangle pointing that way, and I touch the button and the triangle goes the other way, and that's just showing you that you're getting the stitch to move, to swing in the opposite direction. Oops. Always before starting to sew, we are checking the needle position with relation to the foot. Just as before, I do want my stitch to stitch off the edge. This is something I need to show you. Like a zigzag stitch. Where is it? Where's my trash paper? There we go. Here's the guide pin again. And the fabric's edge is gonna always be lined up so that the guide pin is off the fabric's edge. But in this case, we want our stitch to be right off the edge. And this space will prevent the stitch from looking good. So instead of swinging over the guide, we're gonna have the needle, the guide wire line up with the right side of the pin. This is why there's a book that takes you through all of the different techniques you can use it for. So the stitch is going to go like this, and the stitch will be right off the edge, and the guide is still guiding. We're just not stitching over that guide pin. So that's what I'm setting for. Bring my needle down, and this is set for a 4mm wide swing. It's a little big. I'm going to take it down to a 3.0. And this machine, I believe, even though I've changed my width, it doesn't change it until you do a stitch rotation. So now we're officially in the right swing. Bring the needle down and make sure the guide is over to the needle. I'm getting way too teachy in this session. You're learning more than you should. I'm just kidding. No glasses. Everything's okay. Everything's okay. I have no idea on the stitch length. And the stitch length is fine at what it was set at automatically by the machine at a 2.5. Once again, we want to make sure that the applique fabric is always touching the white part of the guide. Ignore everything else. Ooh, it's so pretty. Now we're turning a corner, and this is when it's so much easier to use a shell tuck than it is to use a blanket stitch. And take that stitch, and it looks as though it's going to advance. It's going to go beyond the fabric. So I'm going to lift the foot and slide it back a little. We don't want it to all of a sudden have a stitch sticking out. Now we can take that stitch and bring it right along the edge of the fabric. And now raise the foot and move it around. We didn't go over the guide, so we don't have to worry about bringing the guide. Forgot what I was saying. Now you don't have to worry about pulling the thread off the guide, because this particular stitch and the blanket stitch, we do not stitch over the guide wire. This is it looks like a real blanket stitch was done because the way the blanket stitch is designed to go back and forth so much. So this is a lot faster to use. It's not as damaging to the fabric. And with the correct needle and thread tension, it's a dream. Try not to watch that needle, it gets tempting. Bring the needle down in the outside swing, lift. When you feel like there's no way you can turn it while the machine's running. Anytime you feel that, I feel like I'm losing control, then stop and lower the needle and lift and turn. You don't have to. There's no prize in that you're going to win by not stopping. You'll end up with a funny looking stitch, which I'm going to show you. I'm doing one without stopping. And now I'm going to stop. So when the circle gets too small, you need to stop more often. So the smaller the smaller the curve, the more often you stop and lower the needle in which position. So now it's once again, it's going to do what it did, and I'm going to show you the difference. And this is when I would take this thread through into the back side of the fabric. And before I stitched over the thread, so the needle thread is in there for this little bit. once again, because you're using such a thick thread, pull the thread down so you're not at risk of bending the needle. And you're going to need a good amount of thread to get it through a hand sewing needle and then pull it to the back side, which I'm going to spare you that unless you guys want me to show you. Want me to show you? I'll show you. My son's always like, you don't show them those things. You should show them those things. Since I have my grab it handy, and there's probably a hand sewing needle in here somewhere, I barely ever hand sew. If I can do it by machine, that's my first option because I can do more in a day. Which one of these looks bigger? This is a lot fatter. I'm going to just use this one. So you just take the needle where you want that thread to come down. Can you see that? There we go. And then you take your little hand needle threader. Or you might be able to just do that. I think I can do that without it. If my thumb weren't injured right now, I'd use this little snap off the hand needle thing that I do. Okay, so now you just pull it through. And voila, there's no beginning or end and no knot. What you then have is your thread on the back side. I'll put you back. This also is great for little snags in your sweaters, for pulling those little snags back through. Now we have where we started, so the needle and bobbin thread can be tied in a knot. So you just tie these together, and you don't have to worry about them coming out. Ah, my scissors are about to fall. So what did we do today? We did needle turn applique by machine, which is invisible applique in my book. It's something I developed back in the early 90s. I did it a different way until Applique came up with their supplies, but I still use my technique for certain things, which is a different technique that I'll cover on another day. But you can see how you can't see your stitching on the outside, and that's the goal of that. And then this is jean stitch thread that we're using here. You can see how it fills in really nice, and that's a 1.5 millimeter stitch length instead of having to use a really short stitch. This is not a blanket stitch. This is the shell tuck stitch reversed, and it looks like a blanket stitch done in about half the time a blanket stitch would be stitching out. The right needle is important, which I discussed, and I was going to do a little of the glow in the dark thread, but it's 4 o'clock and I need to stop. I went too long today. I had too much fun with you. At the beginning of the chat window and in the description of the video after this is over are the links to my school and to the group for the Fabrically Speaking live show that airs every Thursday at 2 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. I hope you enjoyed today's lesson on applique. If you did, go ahead and hit that like button on your way out of the live chat. If you see the like button below the video, you're watching on the replay, and I appreciate your hitting the like button. Tell me what you'd like me to show you in the next lesson, and you never know, I may do exactly what you want. Be sure to visit my school, createwithclairerowley.com. If you've yet to subscribe to my channel, I sure hope you'll do so today. And with that, I have to use my button, I forgot about that, to exit the show. It was going so good, I was going to do a smooth exit. And with that, I'm going to look really quick. Anyone have any more questions? Crud. I think I have a dentist appointment on Tuesday. On the day of the VIP Live, I don't think a lot of people have RSVP'd, so you have negotiation ability. You have to negotiate with the other members. All right, I don't see any questions. It's 4 o'clock anyway. I must go. And with that, I love you all. See you next time. Bye.